What is happening out there, Roto Scouts football fans? Welcome to a Friday night football slate, gang. Good to see everybody out there. We were just talking baseball not too long ago. Still waiting on 3 lineups for your baseball slate. If you're playing the main, I am on top of it. But if you're within the sound of my voice and it occurs to you to remind me to check those last 3 lineups, I would appreciate it at some point during this show. 6 o'clock now. That is a 7:05 start. We're only missing the Twins from 7:40, the A's and the Angels at 9:38. So they are later games. We'll see when they come down. Right now, I feel like I might be talking to myself anyway. Cujo popped in and said hi about 10 minutes ago, but might not be here right now. But we'll see who trickles in the door over the next little bit. But if you happen to hear me out there, just do me the favor of reminding me to keep an eye on those last couple MLB lineups. We've got an interesting football game on tap tonight. Kansas City technically at Los Angeles, but really it's in Sao Paolo, Brazil. And there is no home field. KC favored by 3 in this one, 47-point total. You can see some solid opportunity for offense coming through in this one. A lot of these guys actually did play through the preseason, or at least had some appearances during the preseason, unlike last night. Mentioned at the beginning of the baseball show, my frustration with last night's slate immediately. What a start to the football season. Before the opening kickoff. What an asshole. Had to go and spit on Dak Prescott and get thrown out of the game and completely change the nature of the matchup for Javonte Williams. Just had I known, had anybody, obviously, but obviously that changed the shape of that slate pretty dramatically. Still a good game. 4-point game in the end, I believe. A little bit of a lightning delay in there for an hour and change if you hung in. Nothing at all happened after that was overly interesting outside of the Cowboys not coming through. Jalen Hurts just dominating as usual. He's so good. Saquon doing his thing. Limited targeting for some of the wideouts from Philly, but spreading the ball around. It was nice to see Dotson get involved as a cheapo option down the field. He's going to be a little bit sneaky for the Eagles. I think that's an interesting option. We talked about him a little bit yesterday. We've vamped enough to let a few people trickle in. I know we're probably competing with some of the big boys out there in terms of showtime. This game doesn't start till 8 o'clock, but we're going to go through it at a relatively fair clip. We'll build some lineups. We'll talk through the individual players. An interesting one on deck with a fair number of wild cards here. I think both teams showing pretty capable offenses. We had the Chargers as a really decent pass defense last year, allowed just 6.6 yards per pass attempt, ranked 3rd in the league. Some changes, we'll see what happens with them this year. And obviously, Patrick Mahomes never seen a pass defense that he hasn't wanted to go attack. So plenty of upside on the Chiefs side in the passing game still, and some weapons to use, and some guys that might be able to just exploit finding holes in the offense anyway, like Xavier Worthy, in truth, a gadget-type player that you can give the ball to on a short pass, and he can make things happen out there just missing tackles with his speed. So a lot to work with on the KC side. And then Kansas City, pretty stout against the run last year, 4.2 yards per rush attempt, ranked 7th overall, and middle of the board as far as defending the pass. 7.1 yards per pass attempt, was solidly 15th in the middle of the league. KC gained a little bit more pressure, as is their tendency to blitz a lot and go after the quarterback. 26% pressure rate to the 19.8 that LA had last season. But again, I think we're completely usable with Omarion Hampton pulling a pretty solid projection in his debut. A lot of draft capital went into him. We do have Najee Harris active today. That was a question mark up until, was it today? I forget whether it was today or yesterday that they officially said he was going to be here. We kind of thought he would. But he's not going to get the start. The rookie's starting. So we'll see what that split ends up looking like. And the kid is getting a tough defense to handle. KC ranked in a bunch of advanced metrics like explosive run rate and so on and so forth throughout last year. Pretty similarly strong in like the 7.5 to 8 range, call it. So they have been a pretty decent rush defense. We'll see what they can do as far as keeping it off balance. Justin Herbert, a more than adequate quarterback. And decent pass volume. Not great, but decent. 29 passes a game last year. Had a much better second half of the season last year. Averaged around 250 yards from week 8 on last year. Was dealing with some injuries early on, so you got to forgive him a little bit of that. He had also been, rendered without Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen went to take a vacation in Chicago for a year, but he's back now. Kind of interesting. Shakes things up a little bit with Ladd McConkey. There was a lot of buzz about this in the industry this week. KC, good at shutting down the outside, really struggled against slot receivers last year. McConkey got 60-some-odd% of his run out of the slot last year, but Keenan Allen coming back might have an impact on that. Whichever of those guys, and they might be rotating through that spot, that's where they'll gain some advantage potentially. But I think either of those is a definite weapon in the passing game for DFS. Keenan Allen at just 6,400 looks uniquely cheap on DraftKings. I imagine that's going to make him pretty popular over there. We'll take a look at what those options look like. Total wild card on what Quentin Johnston is going to look like. He's got some competition down here in Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith. Another couple of rookies. So there's some interesting depth to this team. You've got another wild card one in Oronde Gadsden. Going up against Will Dissly, Tyler Conklin for shares at the tight end spot. I don't think we're necessarily going to see much, but that is a kid that people are talking about the skill set in terms of one of those, wide receiver skill sets for a tight end. So maybe something interesting that ends up popping a little bit. I left them with a more substantial projection than some of the, just general bench might not get on the field types, like you see at the bottom of the other team. So I think there's some interesting things to work with up and down this board. We'll look at the different values of it as we end up building lineups. On the KC side, you got Isaiah Pacheco coming back. Didn't look great after returning from injury at the end of last year. Not a huge fan anyway. I think we're going to have Kareem Hunt, impeach on some of those touches a little bit. I think that he's going to see some targeting in the red zone like he did last year, just coming out of the backfield. They've also got Rashad Smith down there who could get on the field and just take away a few key touches, one key series. He's only 200, 300 on DraftKings, 1624 across FanDuel, differently priced across sites. Not really sure what kind of an opportunity we're looking at there. I don't know that there's going to be much upside there. That's just representative of getting on the field for, like I said, a couple series, a few snaps. Might not even be that. And then just a lot of ugly downboard depth type options. We'll see who's active among the Brownlees, Remigios, and so on. I would expect Tyquan Thornton's going to be out there. Elijah Mitchell for depth, but we're not looking in his direction. It's mostly about the guys from Juju up. Noah Gray is always interesting on Showdown. We'll talk about him in a little bit. We'll look at him definitely when we build some lineups. But he sees just enough. They call his number just enough on red zone targets that as a cheap, low-owned, touchdown-dependent option for Showdown, he gets interesting. Flex roll mostly. He's very, very inexpensive, so depending on what it looks like up in the top spot, you can maybe get away with it. You can see he projects out all right. Even with, obviously, the big tight end there. Big tight end didn't really have a great year last year. Last two have been a little bit down. He admitted in the media that he's been distracted by Taylor and all the buzz and being super famous and doing SNL and podcasting and making clay pots or whatever the hell else he does. But then he went and got engaged to Taylor Swift. It's not like he's calmed that down. So we're just giving him credit for being self-aware enough to admit that that's going on and assuming that it's not going to continue. He's also just aging. He's still tremendous. He was still like the fourth best tight end or the fifth best tight end in fantasy points per game last year. Fourth, I think it was sixth in points per game, fourth in targets at the position. But definitely has come down somewhat. The last 2 years combined, he didn't put up as many touchdowns as he did in the year prior to that. He played 16 games last year, scored 3 times. 15 games the year before, scored 5 times. In 2022, in 17 games, he scored 12 times. 9 touchdowns in 21, 11 touchdowns in 2020. 1,300 yards on his 110 catches in 2022. 984 yards on 93 catches in 2023. 823 on 97 catches last year. So again, he's 34 last year, 35 now. Those numbers are on the decline. 8.8 yards per target, 8.1 yards per target, all the way down to 6.2 yards per target over the last 3 years. Again, on the decline. Absolutely still rock solid targeting. Every reason in the world to continue using him for DFS until further notice. But we're going to see further drop-off at some point. He might bounce back, and he could bounce back just on touchdowns this season. And the yardage could stay in the 750, 850 range and be totally fine and pay off fantasy investment. But it hasn't been great the last 2 years. Hasn't been what he was, and it's impacted Mahomes a little bit in terms of just the overall numbers. Mahomes is still tremendous. I have a lot of faith. I like Worthy as a pairing, just with that skill set, that game-breaking speed that he's got. We saw him do it a few times early last year. Kind of faded in some spots, but had big, big play moments and a lot of upside. Hollywood is another wild card on this slate. Fairly priced in the middle, 58 on DraftKings, 87 in the captaincy, 52.78 MVP on FanDuel. It's not bad for a big play wide receiver. Just had nothing going in the few games that we saw him in this offense last year. Just did not get anything really going. But a viable option at a very, very interesting price. I would expect he's going to get a little popular. Kareem Hunt, I would fully expect to take some touches here. I think he's going to be involved in the passing game. I think he's going to see some red zone opportunities in terms of the passing game at least, if not a few touches just on the ground. Remains a very interesting running back. Very, very affordable on DraftKings. 68.10.2 on FanDuel. Not terrible. 36.54 though. Kind of interesting. And then wild cards from there down. Defenses on both sides absolutely could be in the mix. Everybody traveled to Brazil for this game, so let's remember that. That does, wear and tear factors in, but it's the very beginning of the season as well. Kickers, absolutely on the board as usual. 2 reasonably talented ones, too. Bucker out projecting Dicker, but Dicker much more affordable. Oh, no, actually, I'm wrong about that. It's 5,000, 4,800 across. Never mind. Dicker more expensive at the slightly lower projection. Bucker padded by a little bit more scoring opportunity. Just look at some of the numbers. So Mahomes still came away with 26 touchdown passes, but dipped to a 6.80 yards per pass attempt last season, just 6.2 intended air yards per attempt. The overall numbers for Mahomes the last 2 years have been down somewhat, but there's a good explanation for, where a chunk of the touchdowns and the yardage went. 5,250 yards and 41 touchdown passes in 2022. 23, he threw for 4,100 yards and 27 touchdown passes. And then last year dipped under 4,000 yards, 3,900 yards, 26 TDs, and has gone from 8.1 to 7.0 to 6.8 yards per pass attempt. But when you lose some game breakers, it does have an impact. We'll see what these guys can do to help him bring the numbers back up, some of those bigger numbers. But I like him for touchdowns. I like him to find the yardage. And there's tons and tons of volume, 36.31 pass attempts per game. Also runs with the ball a little bit. It's not a monstrous part of his game, but he'll take off from time to time. More scrambling than like Jalen Hurts type runs, but a capable runner. Worthy, again, a gadget player. Gained 5.2 yards per rush attempt and generally got at least one look, 1.2 attempts per game in that department. Scored 3 times on handoffs. Was targeted last year 5 and change times per game. 9.2 average depth of target, but he saw a variety of targets because they're using him in different roles. So he can definitely make things happen out there. Again, whether or not it's by beating somebody, getting open deep, and taking a touchdown to the house that way, or just catching something short, breaking a guy's ankles and just taking off. Capable across the board. The catch skill, 3.5 catches on 5.8 targets a game. The Chiefs generally have issues with guys actually hauling in some of the high volume passing. But that is a very dynamic player. 6 touchdowns through the air last year, 9 on the ground. Definitely can do some fantasy scoring. A worthwhile option in the captain role to get that multiplier. Depends on what the popularity is going to look like on your site of choice. Kelsey came away, still led the team at 8.3 targets a game, and again was among the top 5 in tight end targets overall. Hauled in 6.1 of those, just on a 6.4 yard average depth of target, and again, only scored 3 times. That's the concern, and I use concern kind of loosely there, because even with that, he was targeted 25 times in the red zone last year. So yeah, just because this didn't result in a ton of touchdowns does not mean that we couldn't see him vault back to 8, 10, or beyond touchdowns just by a couple better throws, a couple actual catches, and bringing the opportunities in, because the opportunities exist in a big, big way. So while you might want to degrade the quality of Travis Kelce, and the pricing has honestly come down a little bit from peak numbers, I would keep those red zone opportunities in mind. Pacheco, when he was here, gained 3.7 yards per rush attempt. Again, was fairly limited by the injury. You can kind of write off a lot of last year. Previously, a fairly explosive runner. Has some ability. The most important thing for him really is staying on the field. In his 2 games before the injury, had a touchdown, carried the ball 34 times. The good game was week 2 against Cincinnati, 19 carries for 90 yards. Didn't score. He did score on half the yardage the week before in 15 carries. And then after coming back in week 13, including the playoffs, only 1 game over 50 yards, only 1 game over only 2 games of double-digit attempts. So just limited snap counts, was kind of sharing the role. Not really putting anything up, did not score. Saw a few targets, made a few catches along that to pad numbers a little bit, but was not a significant contributor from week 13 on when he came back. So just kind of something to bear in mind, what the quality actually looks like. He does have Kareem Hunt there. Hunt last year had some interesting games while Pacheco was out, but then kind of faded when Pacheco came back. He did have down the stretch in the playoffs, though. He had 3 double-digit attempt games. He had multiple games of more than 40 yards, 2 games over 50 yards. 1, 2, 3, 4 of his touchdowns came from week 16 through the conference championship game. Prior to that stretch, he arrived here in week 4. Carried the ball right out of the gate 14 times for 69, caught 2 passes for 16. And then week 2 was when he went off. You probably remember 27 carries, 102 yards for a touchdown, and then a catch for 15 yards at a cheap price. Moderate production throughout over a few weeks after that. And then week 10 was kind of when he hit the wall, and then week 13 was when Pacheco came back. But the 3 games, 7, 8, 9, in week 7, 8, 9, 20-plus carries each week, 2 touchdowns in week 7, a touchdown in each of the other 2 weeks, went over 100 yards again against Tampa Bay in week 9, 106 yards and a touchdown. That was his highest volume, or tied his highest volume day. The 2 times he got over 100 yards, he needed 27 carries to do it, and we're probably not getting that kind of volume here. But a little involvement in the passing game for sure. He had 7 catches for 65 yards in week 10, catches throughout reasonable targeting throughout. He went for 10 targets in that 7-catch game, but had multiple games of 3-4 targets. Reasonable expectation there. And then if you missed it when we hopped to the actually, you would have missed it because he's on the running backs page. The other thing I like, a lot of targets in the red zone. So we get opportunity. Didn't convert them. Did have 7 touchdowns on the ground, though. 3.6 yards per rush attempt compared to the 3.7 we were getting out of Pacheco. Is there truly a lot of difference between them for the price difference? It's really going to come down to what the snap counts look like. I do expect Pacheco to be the lead and have the opportunity to. But again, Hunt's going to be out there for a decent chunk. Hollywood, where are those numbers? Where are you? These things are too long. There he is. So Hollywood didn't play until week 16. Caught 5 passes for 45 yards on 8 targets that year. Caught 4 of 7 balls the following week for 46. Only light contribution. Didn't do anything on 2 targets. Literally didn't catch either of them in the divisional round. Caught 3 of 5 for 35 yards in the conference championship. Caught 2 of 6 targets in the Super Bowl for 15. They did call his number a few times in those big spots. It's encouraging, at least. He's obviously got talent. I thought I grabbed his... The 2 years in Arizona, mediocre output, 7 combined touchdowns across the 2 seasons, 1,200-ish yards on like 110 catches. A 91-catch season in 2021 with Baltimore, though. 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. And the 2 years prior to that, scored a fair amount of touchdowns. So getting regular action here with Patrick Mahomes, a little more opportunity to get comfortable in the offense and actually familiar. You got to like the upside, and the pricing is right at 58.87, 52.78 on the FanDuel side. Not bad. And then getting into Noah Gray. Again, we see opportunity for Gray. 2.9 targets a game. When we're looking specifically at those tight end 2 opportunities, where nobody goes there, they're always cheap for Showdown. If they happen to come away with that touchdown, he did it 5 times last year. 8.9 yards per target, average depth of 6.2. It's not a significant amount of volume. It's not a crazy game-breaking depth of target. But he's capable of getting out, putting up a big gain on a catch, and then getting out for another one and scoring a touchdown. And at those prices, at his low ownership, that is all you need. Granted, if he does it a little bit more than that, it would be helpful. But he is a really, really interesting and kind of the mold for that idea at the tight end, too. Speaking of, Twins and A's lineups are in. If you care about the baseball slate, let me grab those real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. Who do you guys like out there? It's quiet in chat. Not that many people here. As I mentioned, I short notice show and knew we'd be competing with the big boys. Not worried about it, though. Take advantage of the promo code at the bottom of your screen if you haven't already. Doesn't have to be your first subscription. Just has to be a pick up a new monthly. And that'll only cost you $15 with promo code KICKOFF. That's 50 cents a day for the month of September. Runs through the end of this Sunday. So if you want to take advantage and jump on for football, you'll get all of football, all of baseball for the month of September. Then that rolls over to the normal, pretty affordable, under $1 a day price tag on a new monthly as soon as your expiration hits. And once that happens, we'll be in October. We'll be starting to consider hockey, basketball right around the corner. All those things are included for the same under $1 a day. lot of content coming your way. Overnight tonight's when a lot of it's going to get created. But you should see the individual player rankings for football at each position rank land on the site. You'll see an updated version of the stack rankings. And then gradually overnight tonight, if you're staying up all night with me, you'll see game-by-game notes start appearing with the lineup optimizers, the groups article that I always put up. It's become less important, I think, for some people, depending on how you come about your lineups with all the new sim tools and everything. But I think it's still an important piece of the puzzle to really call out who the key guys you want to provide, you want to put into your stacks are, how you can nudge them to get them if you need to. And then I try and do a little bit of a dive into just the notes about each player, give you a little something about each situation for the games. Over the weekend, you'll get the above below, where we look at, where we might be a little bit different from what we're seeing out there in the wild in the industry in other places. What else is out there for content? Projection updates throughout. It's probably a piece I'm forgetting. And baseball projections are almost updated. There, wasn't too bad. Hopefully. All right, one lineup to go for baseball. It's just the Angels, who I still think look really interesting tonight. Getting down into, as we discussed yesterday, you want to consider some of the offbeat options to a degree, but you want to consider obviously the more realistic ones, like the Noah Grays of the world. They'll be low owned enough. You don't have to get stupid with the guys who are not going to necessarily even see the field. And again, I'll update for active, inactive among whatever of these guys as we get into reporting. But like a Juju is an interesting option with all eyes on Hollywood and Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce. Juju could sneak through in that like Jahan Dotson kind of a thing where he puts up a decent score on a deep ball. And Dotson had a few more opportunities than that. I would think that Juju would draw a couple of targets. Last season, just 1.9 per game. So I think a couple is right in there. Just scored twice. Was held to 8.9 yards per target. Not terrible. He doesn't get down the field all that much. More short game option. Just a 5.6 yard average depth of target. Just 3 and change percent of the air yards. But that's the nature of this offense. So you take some of those underneath options. Rashad Smith. 7th round picks, so not exactly a lot of draft capital sunk in there. 1,300 yards on 235 carries in college last year, scored 14 times. Drew 51 targets, was involved in the passing game. Another player who could get out there on some passing downs. So maybe he sees that in addition to a series or two. Just strips a little potential away from Isaiah Pacheco on a bad night. Strips a little potential away from Kareem Hunt on a bad night. Kareem Hunt does the same thing to Pacheco. He does less to Smith. I don't think you necessarily want to go Smith. I think it's too big a dice roll, even at those crazy cheap prices on DraftKings with no guarantee of what the workload's going to look like. Thornton, just a depth option. Total dart throw. Does have the ability to get down the field a little bit. 15.8 yard average depth of target on his 1.3 opportunities per game last year. Didn't turn it into any kind of production whatsoever. 5.9 yards per target. Didn't catch one ball per game. So super limited option. But maybe they call his number and get out down the field once and try and take one big deep shot. And at times, that's all you need. So between like him and Brashard Smith, where I don't know how much we're really touching the ball, even at those cheap prices, I think Thornton probably is the more interesting guy if you're just playing dice roll types. And Elijah Mitchell falls much into the same, I don't know if we're seeing the field at all kind of bucket. And then same thing with those guys. Justin Herbert on the other side, another solid quarterback. Again, threw the ball 30 times a game. 23 touchdowns against just 3 interceptions. Dynamite as far as protecting the ball. Solid efficiency. 8.6 intended air yards per target as well. Does throw, or per attempt rather. Does throw the ball downfield. And a capable passer who averaged more than 250 yards for the second half of the season last year. Was hampered a little bit early on by injury. But definitely an interesting quarterback who can get it done with this group of receivers. He gets Keenan Allen back. He's got Ladd McConkey, who was tremendous last year and really came on strong through the second half. McConkey ended up seeing 7 targets a game, putting up a rock solid 10.3 yards per target. That leads this group by far. 9.9 yard average depth of target, can go out and get it. Scored 7 times. Keenan Allen had 7 touchdowns last year, even in that limited offense. Just 6.1 yards per target, but remember who was throwing him the ball. He was still targeted heavily, 8.1 times per game. Still gained his separation on routes. There's nothing wrong with Keenan Allen. 6,400 on DraftKings feels a little bit generous. I can see him getting very popular at those prices. 96, I can see him being a reasonable captain play there. The pairing of both guys with Justin Herbert gives you tremendous upside. There is reason to expect that both of those guys could find the end zone. The game breaker would be 2 for one of them and another one for the other guy. In between, and it's reasonable to think that 3 touchdowns through the air is in play the way that this team's going to go about things. Omarion Hampton, as mentioned before, the big rookie. Popular in season long, probably going to be pretty popular here. I don't love the idea of smashing him into a pretty good run defense. Again, 4.2 yards per rush attempt, ranks 7th. Good at limiting explosive runs and whatnot throughout the year. All the advanced metrics were favorable for KC last year. It's a new season. We'll see what it looks like. Kid was drafted 22nd overall in the first round. Gained 1,600 yards on 281 attempts last year. Scored 15 touchdowns. It was his second year in a row with those kind of numbers. Also was targeted 44 times in college. Caught 38 of them for another 2 touchdowns and 300 and change yards. 9.8 yard receiving average. 5.9 yards per rush attempt. Those numbers are going to cool somewhat as a rookie in the NFL. But he's undeniably good. They put that draft capital into him for a reason. And I would expect that as the named starter here ahead of Najee Harris, he's going to see a fairly significant workload right out of the gate. The question becomes, if he struggles initially against, again, a pretty decent run defense, does that lead to Najee touching the ball a little bit more than like 6 weeks from now, what it looks like on the average day? Just for the opener, for the travel. I don't know much about Omarion Hampton's life, but trips as far as Brazil may not have ever been a part of it before. So, some potential shakeup there. Kid is priced out of the gate at $8,000, $12,000, more reasonably at $64.96 on FanDuel, I think. A little bit more interested there, but definitely in play, going to be popular on both sides, touchdown upside on both sides. Najee's in the mix, but it's the same as we've always had with Najee. There's always the workload share. There's always the questions. Talented guy, solid body running back, but he's playable. I never really loved pushing him too hard. 7,000, 10,500, 8,000, 12,000. Was injured through the preseason. Workload questions. They're going to be throwing the ball plenty. I don't love it. And then we get this messed down depth chart. Johnston had a concussion. We're expecting him, but we don't know how much. And that's typically the story with him. When he's on the field, it can be tremendous. Solid 10.8 yard average depth of target last year. Scored 8 times. Was targeted 6.1 times a game. But the impact of Allen coming back, the impact of the presence of some of the rookie receivers, and just the general state of affairs with what's going on with him leads to some questions. Trey Harris, second round pick. There's real draft capital there. That kid's gonna see opportunity. It's not on the injury report. I would expect to see a few balls in his direction. Going to compete with Quentin Johnston for looks. He caught 60 passes for 1,030 yards in college last year, scored 7 touchdowns. And again, second round pick. He's also 6'3", 210, big-bodied receiver. Keandre Lambert-Smith is a 5th round pick, if memory serves. Less expectation of volume goes with that. But he's another guy, 6'1", 182, out of Auburn. Scored 8 times last year on just 50 catches, 981 yards. Solid numbers. Again, maybe it doesn't get as stretched out for either of those guys, especially in the first week, especially after the travel again for them too. Rookies, just getting acclimated to NFL travel, let alone international NFL travel. Same applies to Arande. He's 6'5", 236, 5th round pick out of Syracuse. People love the skill set. We will see what the volume looks like as the, at best, 3rd tight end on the depth chart behind Disley, behind Conklin. Disley's always a okay consideration at the tight end spot. It'll be interesting to see where the targets go here, though. 4.3 per game, 4.5 per game last year. 2 touchdowns to 4 touchdowns. So a little bit of a share there. They project out pretty similarly. I think what you don't want is both guys in a lineup. I think either guy landing in a lineup, fine to okay. Haskins, Darius Davis, desperation options down the bottom of the board there. Quiet in the chat. Just a handful of people here hanging out. Appreciate you. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel when you get a chance. Let's build a few. We'll start on DK. Any requests? If not, I'm just going to figure something out. I'm going to start with Keenan Allen. Just because I want to. I really think that 64 is an interesting price. Not sure what the ownership looks like. Let's do this first. And then I'd be inclined to go in this direction. And then we'll just take our little shortcut at the tight end down there and get all our money back. Now I got $6,900 to spend on my last 2 spots, or $7,000 essentially. Get me Najee. Don't love that. Give me Pacheco. It's not uninteresting. Although if I go to Kareem Hunt, I can make another big purchase. Doesn't quite get me to McConkey. The interesting question then becomes 64. I wish these prices were in order. I'm not sure whether or not. I probably sorted by FanDuel pricing. Well, I mean, it's super easy at this point to just go like that. It's sub 10 dupes in the DraftKings contest. DraftKings, 100,000 fewer entries today at 88,235 with $500,000 up top. FanDuel, significantly smaller. That's actually a manageable contest size on FanDuel. Much smaller contest, or much smaller prize, rather. This is reasonable. Again, we're shooting for sub 10 with a lot of these builds. You can get higher payout, lower probability lineups through, simming and cut it down further. And we'll find some that are lower than this. but that's reasonable. Leaves 1,300 on the table too. If you wanted to improve, say, the Noah Gray spot, you could bring that up to like a Will Dissly, which is reasonable. That's not bad. It's 6.5. I don't hate that. Same spot. 29. Andy likes the Hampton MVP on the blue side. We'll jump in there. Bino, cheapest and most realistic have to go together, I think. So if there's somebody realistic that's just at one of the $200 prices, then absolutely fire away. But when we're talking about guys like, Brownlee or Remigio that I don't even know see the field, don't really love that. But I do think you have enough in like the $1,000, $1,200 range. If you wanted to throw a dart at a big play or two out of Gadsden at 800, it's not completely nuts. But like Noah Gray with actual realistic targeting and a bunch of touchdowns last year, 1,600, not unreasonable. Cheap pricing on Conklin, who should see the field. Juju at 32 is not bad. Harris should see the field. Will Dissly at 24, not bad. Even the guys who are going to be, pretty regularly on the field are not crazy expensive here. So I think it's just a very fairly priced slate. But yeah, it all just it hangs on what that price against any expectation of snaps and target or touch opportunities looks like. But I don't have a threshold of like would not spend less than that, would not spend more than that, without that calculus. Ducking likes Conklin. Yeah, Conklin slots right into that same thing. 9.26, a little bit more popular. I think Dissly was lower than that, right? Yeah, slightly less popular going the Dissly route. Conklin a little bit more expensive. But either one of those options is totally solid. We should see some targeting there. 36. We can't get to any of those up that way. We already saw the Noah Gray version. It's changed things up a little bit. So I think there are reasonable paths through the Keenan Allen captaincy. The Mahomes captaincy, as usual, I tend to like the quarterbacks in the flex spots just because it's, for one, an easy way to fade some public ownership while also saving on that multiplier salary. Just gets problematic in a hurry with the salaries. Why is that not coming up? He's right there. Why would it not? Q2. I don't understand why that's not filling out. Well, let's see what a Mahomes Kelsey here looks like. There it goes. I don't get why it needed me to do that before to do the math, but all right. Mahomes Kelsey look here. Let's get like a super chalky version would be, can we do something here? And then 4,000 a piece. You could easily get like 45. But 200 dupes, like I said, super chalky. That's where you run into problems when you're building with a quarterback like Mahomes, who's just so popular in that spot, and it cuts into your salary, and you're just not getting away from the field. I intentionally went with the most popular two options there, and then ones that would be popular here. I obviously could have grabbed guys that I know are lower owned. If I had just done this, we cut it in half, but that's still pretty significant dupes wise. So that's not the approach that you want to take. Just an important thing to remember as you're building lineups, if you're not doing it through, big process simming and everything. But let's see if we can do something interesting with these two up top. Probably not truly interesting. I think this would make sense. And you could go for the overload in the pass game and try and take another lesser owned, but still somewhat likely to at least see some involvement pass catcher there. And then we're just obviously hoping for either a straight line of touchdowns through the two tight ends, and I don't totally love that, but they see enough, and then big play, a couple big plays, or the third touchdown going through Juju there. And then we've got 11,000 per spot to spend. So the best path to reducing ownership is obviously just leaving a little cash on the table. In this version, you could easily go with Hampton. You could go with Pacheco if you're interested in that. See what Hampton does. Yeah, it already pairs things down nicely, and then we're obviously leaving a giant chunk of money on the table. Let's just take Ladd as the most expensive guy. Brings it down to 11, but we're leaving way too much there. Let's take Gray out so we avoid that double tight end scenario, and we'll give this instead. So we've got Kels, we've got Juju. What happens if I throw Hollywood in for Juju, actually, and do it differently? I'm at 41. Don't want the Chargers defense against all that. Dicker's 5. I don't love that. Bucker's 48. And Hampton's jamming me up now. I mean, you could plug Juju right back in next to that and just completely overload that KC pass game. It's still duped 21 times, though. And you're leaving the potentially best piece of it out, or the second best. I don't love that. Again, this exercise right now with these two is just looking at, using the chalk pieces up there, what you can do to get different. So it's expected to be challenging. Let's go back to the ground here, though, and go that way. I wonder, actually, what about throwing a blanket over the idea of like the two running backs, the two more featured running backs, and Kelsey being the core of the offense for KC? Maybe the wideouts don't really work out. Mahomes still pays off his upside because he can throw a touchdown to really either of those running backs. Hampton in theme with keeping the ball, kind of more grindy scenario. We're still 128 dupes deep. That's not great. Plenty of money to spend. That's not our problem. We can have everybody from Worthy down. If you wanted to pad the stack with Mahomes there, getting Worthy into this version, you're duped too many times. It takes the value out. That is a decent lineup, but it takes all the value away being duped that many times. So wouldn't sim out great, despite being a decent lineup. Let's do something different. Gadsden inactive. There you go. All right. So we knock him off the board, and it zeroes it in a little bit more on the two primary tight ends then. Good to know. We'll get that updated. Ooh, speaking of updates, we do have the Angels lineup in. Let me grab that. Think about who you guys want to see in. We'll do another DraftKings, and then we'll hop over and build a couple on FanDuel, and then we'll get punched out of here. More sane schedule next week when I have the full week to work with. We're just a little bit hampered by some things going on this week to start things off. But we'll get a better schedule rolling. We will have tomorrow, if you weren't here already, at some point tomorrow, there will be a main slate show. Some form or other. I'm probably not going to try and keep you guys here for like 4 or 5 hours like we've done a few times in the past to talk through the main slate. We'll keep it reasonable. We'll make good time. But stay tuned for that when you'll see the announcement go up. I'll mention in Discord. I'll send it out on Twitter. If you're a subscriber with notifications and so on at the channel, that'll help you. Speaking of, hit the like button down there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Website is rotoscouts.com for the... I can't imagine it's many people who aren't already familiar, but if you haven't subscribed recently, if you're in between subscriptions, a new month, the first month costs you $15, 50 cents a day for the first month on any new subscription, or any new monthly rather. And that does not have to be a first time subscription, just has to be a new, pick up a new subscription. So give that a look if you're looking to come on back, looking to check us out for the first time, or sitting there wondering, who is this guy and what is he talking about and what's at his website? Baseball is updated. All lineups confirmed. Let me just type that. And that one. So I think since somebody did request the Omarion MVP on FanDuel, I think only fair to do one on DraftKings real quick. Let's get him up there. I'll take a tour through like Mahomes. I don't feel like we've used Worthy all that much yet. And then I don't mind the idea of the opposing defense against a running back captain, running back MVP. It's not my favorite path. 44, that leaves me 58. Take both non-Kelsey primary receivers, and then I don't love that 58. Yeah. That's not my favorite way to do it. I might still take that Hollywood option, though. See what that looks like. 51. That's interesting. Still 20 dupes. That's rough. Hampton's got some popularity in that captain spot, I think. Obviously, we're using top-end pieces across the board here. Look, if you're splitting $500,000 20 ways, it's not the worst thing in the world. I can vouch for that. But there's probably better ways to build this lineup. Let's take Worthy out. That's 64. I don't know if I want both QJ and Allen without Herbert. I don't think this buys us that. Does it? No. Not nearly. Damn it, 18. So then you get the Disley option in there instead. Artificially bring it down a little bit. 13, we're getting there. And then we're obviously, you need to kill probably Hollywood. We could get different with that. Yeah, you go the Juju route there. I bet that's going to, that'll get it down. You're leaving a chunk on the table at 32. But that's a reasonable path, and you're just replacing Hollywood's potential targeting with Juju's, and reasonably similar upside. We've seen quality out of both guys over time. That's not a bad way to take that, to cut that ownership down that duplication down that far, and we're still using prime pieces through several of those spots. You got to obviously have Disley outperform Conklin at the tight end spot. It's not bad though. That's a reasonable approach to an Omarion captaincy over there. See what an Omarion MVP looks like on the other side as requested. We'll do similar things here. We'll go that way. Let's just throw it to Kelsey real quick. See what happens there. What am I at? 88. It's FanDuel. You can do whatever you want. Ain't done much with kickers. You can Dicker in there. Pacheco's 9. That's easy to reach. And then I've only got 9,800 left to spend. Unfortunately, the way they're priced, obviously I've already got several of those pieces. And then just leave money on the table and take whoever. How about Keenan Allen? Hey, not duped at all. Is this necessarily actually correct? No. Would this probably be duped like 5 times in reality? Yeah. I would expect it to be duped 5 or more times. But it's not a crazy lineup. And again, leaving money on the table definitely helps a little. So I think that's entirely realistic. I kind of like the Keenan captain here, or Keenan MVP. Given the Omarion's price, that just helps so much. 96 versus the 12.6 we're paying just by going up to Keenan, let alone the upper echelon. So that's why we were able to build such a somewhat loaded lineup there. But Keenan, obviously Herbert, still go the Mahomes route there. I still can get Kelsey a worthy into this lineup easy enough. But like you could also just so easily go down the board to Hollywood at half the price. Juju even further. What if we were to do that? Already at 3. Haven't even finished it yet. I don't know that. I mean, the power of the low-owned player up here is extreme as far as cutting down these at least mathematical dupes. Like we can afford Pacheco in this lineup. Sub 1. Telling me that doesn't play? Again, skeptical that actually is sub 1 dupes. This is playing off the ownership projections that we have. But that is an interesting lineup. Let me just see what those numbers actually are. I don't want to pull them up on screen. They're in the sheet there, but I don't want to expose them to you people. You got to pay RG for those mediocre ownership projections of theirs. Where's that captain number? Oh, does it not display on here? It's just in the file? That's weird. I didn't actually know that. Yeah, so the reason that cuts down so far is exactly what I expected. And it is color-coded here. Like, that's why I knew this would be a low number. That's a 2% owned projection on Keenan Allen in the MVP spot on FanDuel. He could blow that out of the water. And just look at the power of what that does in terms of just cutting down the number of people you're duplicated with while using the exact same players by and large that they're going to be using. And it's Keenan Allen. It's not like I'm picking some schlub. You just go straight line Travis Kelce in the MVP. Mahomes, let's see how duh we can make this. Even that is 3,700 left. Now, I did use 2 less than likely options down there with the 4 most expensive guys, but that's a Kelce captain. Mahomes, McConkey, Herbert. Is Kelce not projected for ownership? That's a... That does technically equal 100%. All right, so I picked a bad example as the popular captain. It turns out that per this site anyway, Kelsey's also in the single digits. That's why that one worked out so well. But this is also an intriguing version of this lineup. You got Mahomes not in the captain throwing multiple touchdowns there, though, becomes maybe a little problematic. And he's the one to use in the example. Actually, should have just kept Kels. Now at 27 apiece, let's see if we can meet the challenge there. You go that way, and then you got 3,000, and you can get Juju into it, and you've used all your salary. 2. Wow, that got lower than I expected. I was getting prepared to say, but you're still duped 15 times. That's an interesting way to build a Mahomes lineup. Kind of stumbled into it. Again, less than likely options in the final couple spots, but realistic ones. You're playing with possibility and probability there. I'm going to make this a little bit more balanced, a little more affordable. Just to do that, obviously. And then 46. You can take the trade dart. He's, I assume, going to see some targets as long as he's active. Haven't seen it yet. Like, yeah, we've been playing in this lower end here, but if we wanted to go to our little Noah Gray secret weapon there, and then we're only asking for 2 touchdown passes at Mahomes, both of which go to tight ends, and I reclaim I'm at 58, so I can get QJ in there alongside Herbert and Keenan Allen. Again, sub 2 dupes, reasonably projected. So there are paths to getting to reasonably high-end stuff. And it turns out that it's actually via kind of throwing in some of the most expensive along with Mahomes in the captain role, rather than trying to go to him and then like balanced throughout. Starsy Scrubsy gets a little bit more interesting there. That's your path toward cutting down some ownership in Mahomes lineups, I think. Yeah, well, Marion was also getting some ownership. That's why he looked a little bit popular there. I like the look of those couple of lineups that came together pretty quick on FanDuel, though. It's a day to be out there building a bunch of lineups. FanDuel's got an interesting little $3 20 max rolling, though. It's an interesting way to go about Showdown. You just kind of either take a big spread or have your lane and just kind of try and nail not every combination, obviously, but everything, that you can get to within that specific lane, and, play the game script and everything. McConkey about to get loose tonight. Yeah, I didn't give Ladd necessarily his due in all those lineup builds. It's obviously tremendous. Monster last year. Looking to build on that. No issues whatsoever with strong consideration. And I think on both sides, he'd be an interesting multiplier guy. Throw them in with their kicker, and then we'll take Patty anyway along for the ride. 52. Get some Hollywood in there with Mahomes, and then 47. Leaves us just shy of some of those options. I wouldn't mind actually having that, and then that gives me 57. Where was Kareem Hunt? Yeah, Hunt's super cheap, so that actually makes that work. Then actually you can improve on the Dicker spot if you wanted to. Where was that owned? I think that was super highly duped. Oh, no, that's leaving 21 on the table. Sub 10 dupes for a Ladd captaincy. 3 options there. You're getting both kickers in. And then it's Kareem Hunt there. What did I have, though? 57? Hollywood being 58 kind of sucks there. You get Juju. You can get Noah Gray. Leave some money on the table. You don't take Bucker. And let's go back the Hollywood direction here. Like a Bucker Hollywood Juju pairing is kind of interesting. Still leaves 15 there. What if we go up the board for that option? What if it's Pacheco? Not uninteresting. 10, 11 dupes is not the end of the world. But obviously it does shave things down. But that's a playable piece. And then you could go different ways from there. If you work Noah Gray into that one, you're probably offset even further or exactly the same. Any of the dart throw guys? Trey's 34. Disley, we know, is lower owned than Conklin. That gets it down under 10 if you go that route. Although that might come up a little bit. I was on a roll there for a second. I don't know what I want to do with this last spot now. I just wanted to see what we could. Oh, this doesn't have the KC defense ownership in it, though. Ignore these dupes numbers. I forgot to change the Chiefs to the Kansas City Chiefs for the DK ownership. I promise you won't look. That's actually with a spot to go. Let me take that one a little bit more seriously, actually. Let me get take Pacheco out, leave Kelsey in. And then 57. Can I get Herbert in something? Nah, 16. That's a little too low end, except that it does lead to Noah Gray right on the nose. That's a weird one. Just Herbert, his kicker with the defense in there. I mean, that makes sense narratively. And then maybe like a conservative KC game where he just throws a couple touchdowns to the tight ends. It's not the most insane build I've ever seen. It's also not the highest projected build I've ever seen. Need some happenstance there. But it makes sense, when you build a weird one like that, it's, in my opinion at least, it makes sense to have it also have like narrative logic to it. We're only dealing with one game here, so we've got a constrained version number of variables, and there's dependencies built in, right? For this to happen, it means this can't happen, if you get me. Monster game out of the running back where you carried the ball 30 times means you're probably not having that much opportunity to throw the ball for the most basic type example. But considering the various dependencies, that's not the weirdest lineup in the world. You could also argue that, like, Butker, and then obviously you can't go Butker Dicker there unless you're getting Kelsey out of it, which doesn't really make much sense. But again, if we're just riding like low-end game, you just at random, since he's the exact price, Quentin Johnson in there. And yeah, sub one. Again, it's all about that KC defense in the top spot. And then Dicker doesn't look like he's got all that much ownership. Same thing with Butker. So just having those two in there and a defense in the top spot. And this would just be riding that idea of like traveling to Brazil, pain in the ass, low end game to start the season from both teams. A lot of disappointment, but we've got some of the obvious scoring around the two quarterbacks anyway. Wild card on which wide receiver's in there, and you can pick your poison with whoever fits in price-wise. There's a path to that coming through, but I think I like that other one a little bit better with some, more of the actual offenses in it. There's just different things you can do as you're clicking through options. Tall to God, what's going on, man? Yo, good to see you. Probably about to bail out. We've been going for an hour and change. Built a few lineups in here. Found some good ones. If you got any requests, though, here, I'll happy to throw them in. Take a look. as important as it is going through just sim data, leverage, and all of that. And again, that's super important. And check out our guys over at acemind.io for your sim and optimization needs. Promo code RotoScouts still should get you 20% off your first month over there. But I think it's also important to get into the nuts and the bolts of it for people who are out there hand building 3-5 entries, whether they're lotto tickets in the massive contest or, for a 20 max, just a single entry. Who is my favorite GPP captain for DK? I really like the idea of Keenan Allen. I really do. I think he's going to be low owned enough on that slate, but let me take a look. Make sure it didn't get out of control because he's low priced. Again, I could just pull up the numbers in the sheet again, but I should not. Lower mid single digit captain ownership for Keenan Allen. I think that makes so much sense. And Travis Kelce on both sites is honestly not getting as much ownership in the captain, the MVP spot that I would expect. Either one of those rock solid veterans with plenty of touchdown upside seem under-owned to me. You have wild cards in there like Hollywood, Isaiah Pacheco, or Kareem Hunt are viable paths through there. But if you're just asking pure favorite, my initial response is Keenan Allen at lower ownership than Travis Kelce and a lower price. Makes more things happen and more things come together. But Kelce's also interesting there. Your most likely paths through a lot of the math probably remain with some of the top end projections. So it really depends on, are we immediately looking to get away from a lot of the field with our captain decision? Are we willing to take on some weight with ownership there? But I really like the path through those two veteran players at the captain spot. It leads to interesting lineup builds. And we saw the potential of cutting down the ownership, gaining some leverage on the field. So I'm really interested in those guys. And Tall, if you just rewind 10, 15 minutes, just look for when I'm building lineups on the DK side. I built lineups with both of those guys in captains and a couple that I came across that I kind of liked. But with that in mind, gang, I think I am going to punch out. Baseball slate's underway. See what's going on over there. Check out some lineup builds, and I'm going to take a brief break, have some dinner, and then I got to get started ranking out all the players for the individual position by position rankings. I got to get on the article, punch out the framework for every team for the optimizers and groups piece, and then like a solid paragraph of notes. That thing is a bear to write. That's going to take me all night. So I got to start working on that at some point. But you guys absolutely rock out there. Appreciate every one of you. All the subscriptions, the thumbs ups, all of that good stuff. Hype the videos as we do on YouTube now, apparently. It's a new thing. If it's available down there, hit that as well. Would appreciate. And good luck out there tonight. Should be some chaos in Sao Paolo. Should be a fun one, though. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Share those results when you do at RotoScouts on Twitter, in the free Discord, which is linked down in the description below. Content through the weekend. Main slate football show still planned for sometime tomorrow. I will let you know. Stay tuned. We'll see you, gang.